Parrot TV, the voice for humanity.
Hi, welcome to Parrot Literary Corner. I'm your noble and honest host, Dustin Pickering. As you well know, we have an anthology that we just released on August 1st. If you have not purchased this, it is outstanding. Casey Dorman just got his copies, and he said this fabulous and stellar anthology of visionary minds, international. It's a wonderful book. We put a lot of work into it. We hope you enjoy it. So purchase your copy. Today's wonderful writer is a historical novelist. Her name is Jenny Jaeckel, and then she is the award-winning author and illustrator of several books, including her novel Boy Falling, a companion book to House of Rujo, a collection of illustrated short fiction entitled For the Love of Meat, and the graphic novel memoir Spot 12, 5 Months in the Neonatal ICU. When not writing, Jaeckel works as an editor and translator. She lives in Victoria, British Columbia, with her family. Thanks for joining us today, Jenny. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. It's a little bit of a little rainy day, a little bit out there, but it's good. It's a good day, and it's wonderful to talk with you today. So I'm curious. Obviously you write historical fiction. I'm
Yes.
curious, how accurate should the historical situation in your novel be to the actual history? I mean, there's a lot of this debate over perspectives, obviously, but how do you
Yeah.
manage to create an atmosphere that's true to the history?
Yeah. Well, that's such a great question because I think even people that are writing history that's not supposed to be fiction, that's a hard job
Hmm.
because, when as anytime you choose to say something about the history, you're leaving something else out. So, um, you know, it's is so subjective, even if it's nonfiction.
Hmm.
So in the fiction, for me, I definitely try to be as accurate as I can, as far as historical events that are shaping the lives of the characters, and then also, um, historical events, um, time periods, and all the things that go along with the time periods, including kind of what the objects are in their space. Like,
Hmm.
um, for example, there's a scene in so the one book you mentioned my two historical novels, so I've got them here too, like Show and Tell. So House of Rougeau and then Boy Falling, they're companion books. They're standalone, but this one came first, and then this one just came out in July. So, for example, in House of Rougeau, there's a scene where it's the late 1800s, and there's a woman in Toronto, and she goes to live there, and she's living in a small house of people that are, it's like working class, small little home. And so in my research, I was like, well, she needs to use the bathroom. Like, what kind of bathroom do these people have? This in their time period, in their location, in their social class. For example, what kind of bathroom are they going to have? Um, it's not a scene that is like heavily focused on the bathroom, but all these little background details need to be, um, you know, as accurate as possible. So I really try to be accurate. But then at the same time, there's so much interpretation that goes into um, into the writing. So, you know,
Hmm.
I'm always thinking like a historian's going to read this and point out like all my mistakes, but
Oh, really?
yeah, but then I'll be
That way
like, I wish
sometimes
I
you feel
had you as an editor.
right, or have a second pair of eyes that was that wouldn't that knew the position and place of the persons you're referring to, and then
Exactly.
be able to give you a little tidbit of knowledge, like, oh yeah, that would have been green, not blue, or something like that.
Right, exactly. And sometimes I have those people as readers and they give me the feedback.
Mhm.
But sometimes most of the time I don't. I'm kind of doing my best with the research.
How long was your research period for you, the two books? Obviously they span what 300 years of
Yeah.
history?
Yes. So House of Rujo goes from the late 1700s to 1964, and it spans from the Caribbean to North America to the northern cities of some Canadian cities and also New York and Philadelphia. And Boy Falling is a much shorter time period. It goes from, it mostly takes place during World War I and World War II, the interwar period. So mostly in there, but it does span, begins somewhat before, ends somewhat after. So, so the research was a lot more intensive for House of Rujo because more time periods and more locations. And then Boy Falling takes place mostly in New York and Paris. So again, shorter time frame and fewer locations. So my research was, I didn't have to do as much. But as far as like how long did I spend, I do not remember, because House of Rujo originally came out in 2018. And so I was working on it and researching, a few years prior. And now that I'm getting older, my memory it's just not what it once was. So I'm like, I don't know how long it was, but it was definitely a intensive period.
Where did you, I say where, it could be, what kind of research materials did you pursue in that research you were doing?
Yeah, well, House of Rougeau deals with, it starts out, the characters are enslaved people, so enslaved on the Caribbean island of Martinique. And so I was reading, there was just, let's see, there was one history that was particularly helpful, which was a history of Barbados and the sugar trade. Sugar and slavery went together. That was an amazing book. It's called Sugar in the Blood. If anyone's interested in that particular history, it's an amazing book. There was also a really important history that I read, Black history in Canada. I don't have that title in front of me. I wish I did. I wish I could remember that, but that was a super helpful book. I read slave narratives, but like several of those, and then reading about civil rights era. And there were a number of books that I read getting like larger pictures, and then there were lots of articles. So it was like the macro and the micro research. So for example, with Boy Falling, I read a lot about the Harlem Renaissance and also the Jazz Age in Paris. And so it took me a while to kind of get a handle on what this time period was like and who were the big players. And then I could start asking the smaller questions, like, which I mentioned, like for the bathroom, what kind of bathroom do they have? What kind of beer are they drinking? Are they drinking beer? And those kind of the smaller details as well as the bigger picture. And then I had one special source with House of Rujo for the chapters that take place in Philadelphia, because my husband is from Philadelphia, and so I got to ask his father, so my father-in-law, a number of questions about, okay, so these characters, they're living in the 60s in Philadelphia, and this is their demographic. So where, what part of town would they be living in? There's a doctor, what street would the doctor's office be on? These kind of, and I got to ask a bunch of very particular questions of him. And that was cool to have someone I could actually talk to, because otherwise, my sources were just books and articles.
Did you frame the bigger picture and then start kind of narrowing in the sort of smaller details? What was the process for, getting the framework of the books together?
Well, as far as the historical information or as far as the plot and characters and things?
Oh, well, I'm really referring to like how you constructed the world and mostly through the research. Like, did you put together in your mind a big picture and then sort of pick apart the smaller elements and then do research on
Yeah.
that?
Well, that's like, that research is like informs the container
Hmm.
for the lives of the characters. I'd say that my work is very character driven.
Okay.
So I will have an idea of a character, and then I might have an image in my mind of this person in a time and place. And then I'll start asking questions like, what's their situation? And um, what's the conflict in their life? And who are the people around them? And a lot, I really try to get to know the characters kind of internally. So, because I want to know, for example, if they're facing a particular dilemma, the way that they meet that dilemma, the decisions that they make have everything to do with who they are as a person. So I
Hmm.
really, it's like I see the person and they start moving forward and I start following along behind them. And then, of course, how they, like this, for example, one character in House of Rujo, she's a young woman and she is pursuing music. She's a young Black woman. In what ways, given her time period and periods, would she be able to pursue music? What avenues would be open to her?
Hmm.
And then, so her name is Eleanor. And then Boy Falling, so Eleanor has a child out of wedlock whose name is Gerard.
Hmm.
Gerard is the main protagonist of Boy Falling. So Boy Falling kind of picks up where House of Rougeau leaves off. So Gerard is also a musician, um, but he's he's male and he's living a generation after Eleanor. So the opportunities that he has become different. Um, he also has some challenges that she didn't have. So yeah, the character and the way they interact with their time and place, of course, you know, brings out the story.
So when you wrote the first book, what led you to wanting to write the second? Did you feel like you were incomplete, or did you feel like, I'm just stuck in this world right now, I want to keep it moving, or how did that
Yeah,
happen?
yeah, it was like that. So Rougeau, there are 7 protagonists,
Hmm.
and so there'll be one protagonist in a section, and then there'll be a supporting character, and then in the next section, that supporting character will be the protagonist. There'll be some, supporting characters in the next section. Another of the supporting characters will become the protagonist. So it's I wrote it sort of little bit dot to dot that way, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Like, um, so when I finished House of Rougeau, I really had the character of Gerard in my mind. He's only 10 years old when you meet him for the last time in House of Rougeau. And but then he was still in my mind. He was kind of like, ooh,
Hmm.
tell about me next. So that led to Boy Falling.
Interesting. So how does magical realism find itself into the work? How do you use those elements?
Yeah. So my relationship to magical realism is like, I think that real life has a lot of magical elements.
Hmm.
So to me, um, having elements of sort of some happenings that are a little uncanny or unexplainable, some mysterious things, sometimes dream states or other altered states, or an interior reality that's, because like, what are we really on the inside? It's kind of magical realism on the inside anyway.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So, so for me, having those elements makes the story more real. More specifically, in House of Rougeau, you see certain of the characters have kind of a type of second sight.
Mhm.
And you see that not with all the characters, but emerging throughout the generations here and there. And then there's a little bit of, in a little bit of a different way, these elements kind of show up in Boy Falling as well. And Boy Falling, actually, the title is refers to a dream that Gerard starts having when he's in his 30s and he's living in Paris. He's pursuing music there, and this is again in the interwar period, in the 20s and 30s. And he starts to have these recurring dreams about a boy falling through space. So he has these dreams are haunting him. There's kind of music that comes with them. He starts composing an opera based on these dreams. And then as events unfold, you start to get an idea of why he's having these dreams. I won't say.
Right.
But it's also not, there's sort of multiple interpretations going on about what these dreams mean to Gerard. So it's somewhat up to the reader to decide, what does the role of this imagery in this book mean, and what does the dream mean to the character?
Would you like to read maybe a couple of passages from your books?
Sure. Maybe I could read the prologue of Boy Falling.
Okay.
Okay, speaking of the dream. Okay, so this is the prologue. He has been falling for a long time. It seems as though he has always been falling, weightless and through the dark, though there is a single faint shaft of light coming from somewhere up there. He sings a little song to himself, a counting song his mother taught him when he was little before he started school. He holds out his fingers. Here is Mama, here is Papa, here I am, here is brother, and here is the fat man. This is the thumb. He always imagined that the fat man was a baker, though the song never said so. He can tell he's falling and not just floating because he can sense air moving past his face, tiny fingers of it tickling at his eyelashes, the faintest rush at his ears. Where is Mama? Where is Papa? Where is brother? Where am I? He is all alone. He hears a voice. Son. Then he feels arms. He has fallen into a pair of strong arms which hug him to a broad, warm chest. He leans his head against the familiar shoulder, winds his arms around the neck. The falling had been so lonely. Who are you? The boy asks. Don't you know me? Grandpapa. He can see Grandpapa's face now because the shaft of light falls on it, making shadows of the grooves of time carved deep and illuminating the pillowy silver white sideburns burning bright against the weathered dark cheeks. They both look up to the tiny patch of light high up and far away. The boy points. I came from up there. Yes, son, you did. Hand in hand they walk. I haven't seen you in a long time, Grandpapa, says the boy. Did you miss me? Yes. It's nice to be together now, isn't it? It's very nice. The boy hugs the hand and leans into the arm. He feels Grandpapa's voice resonate in his chest like the low strings on Papa's guitar. Where are we going? Oh, places, says Grandpapa. We have lots of places to go. Gerard opens his eyes to the blue light of dawn and swallows against his parched throat. The dream again. He rubs his eyes with the heels of his hands, strips the sheet off his naked body, and sits up, remembering. The curtain, sunset-colored voile, flutters at the open window, letting in the tepid air of the Parisian summer. The metallic tang of the Seine, traces of fermenting fruit, the noises of the street coming to life. He reaches for his music composition book where he has left it on the nightstand and grasps his fountain pen with his long brown fingers. The dream lingers in the faint strains of a melody, and he's got to get them down before they're gone.
Interesting. Creates quite an atmosphere. I really appreciate that. That was beautiful, well written. I
Thank
think, in
you.
my opinion,
Oh,
as
thank you
good as
very
my
much.
opinion may be. It was very, very nice. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh, thank
So,
you.
what role do you think injustice plays in traditional literature?
Injustice.
Mm-hmm. Strange question.
That is an amazing question because wow, you could spend a long time looking at that one.
Mm-hmm. I think you could.
Um,
Well, just a few
yeah,
ideas if you want to propose a couple of ideas.
absolutely. I mean, so the characters, the majority of the characters in House of Rujo and Boy Falling are of African descent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Side note, I don't have any African heritage.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I would say that there are really important questions of justice involved in a white writer writing about Black characters.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be one element there, for sure. Just on that note, I would say that being really diligent about the research and then also having sensitivity readers. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Having sensitivity readers was super important, um, for a variety of reasons, but I think especially if you're anytime a writer is writing who's in whatever way is part of the dominant culture and writing about marginalized communities and characters of belonging to marginalized communities, it's really critical to have sensitivity readers who for example, one of my readers for Boy Falling, so also Gerard is a gay man.
Mm-hmm.
So I was lucky to have one of my sensitivity readers, a wonderful gay Black man who read the draft and then was able to give me a lot of really great feedback about how to bring out those, various points
Mm-hmm.
better. Sometimes things to take out.
Mm-hmm.
So so in a sense, the way a writer approaches their subject, justice is a big deal. I think, how are you going to do justice to your subject? And how are you going to not perpetuate injustice as a writer?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the question of, say, okay, well, how do I portray um, slavery? How do I portray for these characters? How do I portray the racism that all the characters experience, the sexism that characters experience, or the homophobia that Gerard, for example, experiences, or Gerard's grandfather actually, one of the characters in House of Rougeau, who's Eleanor's father, his name is Guillaume. He's also a gay man living in two generations back from Gerard. So how do they experience homophobia in their world? How do the characters experience their race and racism in the culture? Those are all really important questions involving justice and injustice, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something I take super duper seriously. So yeah,
Right.
I really appreciate that question. It's so important.
I think so too. I think, as you said, you don't want the writer perpetuating, I also say, stereotypes or any kind of injustice against marginalized communities. It's a writer's job
Right.
to sort of lift people out of that mindset. As readers, you don't want readers indulging in sort of a voyeuristic
Exactly.
pleasure. Yeah, I totally
Exactly.
agree.
One of the ways that I tried to address that too when talking about violence, I tried to have, there is some violence
Mm-hmm.
in especially House of Rougeau. And I tried to strike a balance between having a minimal amount of portrayal of the violence. You can't talk about slavery without violence. For example, you can't talk about
Right.
racism without some kind of violence involved.
Mm-hmm.
Although I also did not want the focus to be on the violence. I didn't so I was trying to strike a balance between enough violence so that it's real, a limited amount so that it's not in any way gratuitous. And also I wanted the focus to be on the resilience of the characters and how did they survive these things? How did they find their own ways to thrive despite or within the parameters of these, the injustices that shape their times? So now I've forgotten your original question.
I was asking what role does injustice play in literature?
Oh no, that one, but like a moment ago, you had another one. I
Right.
think.
Right. I was just kind of commenting, doing a sort of like bounce back with you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I told you my memory was bad, so.
Yeah, sometimes it happens to me too. I just sort of, I guess writers, I've read, I don't know what you think about this, but I've read and that people who are really creative sometimes do have memory gaps, because that
Oh,
aids the
yeah.
creativity. You have to reconstruct everything and go over it over and over and over. And, and I have the
Okay.
same problem a lot of times.
Okay, good. Then I won't feel so bad about it.
Oh, that's quite all right. I have the
It's just
same
because I'm
problem quite a
creative. Yeah, I have
I've actually read that. I've actually read that scientifically that a lot of
okay.
creatives, I think it's a scientific fact. A lot of creative people have memory gaps and stuff that the creativity helps bridge. It's interesting. I have to look more into that just to be sure to get a good take on it.
Well, yeah, because I mean our minds work in a lot of different ways, but I have a 16-year-old teenager at home here. And when they get on my case about not remembering something, I'm just going to say it's because I'm so creative. So,
right.
Yeah.
I think that because if you forget something, you have to recreate it. Oh, you have to recreate it from scratch in a lot of ways, and that leads you to different levels of thinking. I think it's entirely possible that that's one of the reasons. And plus, your mind could be so compacted with information. That can make you like sort of like have to go back into the the stockpile of information you have in your mind and say, okay, where's that file at that I'm supposed to remember this thing, and you go back.
Oh my God. Seriously, like all my reading, I feel like it just goes into a dumpster. Like there's no organizational system back there, but I do have to retrieve, So I like what you're saying.
I think it's true. I think you can pack your mind so full of so much information. The retrieval takes a little bit of extra time.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you forget things more quick.
Exactly.
In and out, in and out, in and out. So
and then you might go try to retrieve something, but then you're like, oh, but there's that thing, and then you go off on an accidental detour.
Back to the creativity thing, then you go in that, and you have all these associations that happen that most people wouldn't make.
Exactly.
That's what we do as creatives.
Exactly.
That's exactly what we do. So what process did you have for choosing a publisher for your books? Was there a set of values that you had that you had hoped for, or was there like just a general, you looked in and you thought this sounds like the most interesting that would make, or just submit and whoever took it? How did that work?
Yeah, well, my first publisher was called Rain Cloud Press. And the publisher had come across when I started out, I created 3 graphic novels that I self-published. And so she came across the graphic novels. She really liked them. She was like, I'd love to publish these, not the self-publishing, not for real, but publish in a traditional way. So that's how I got hooked up with Rain Cloud. And Rain Cloud was another indie press, wonderful to work with, totally, yes, same kind of values and I don't know, literary outlook. So that was great for a few years there, but then sadly they closed down, and then I was publisher-less for a little while, and I just did at one point, a little over a year ago, I did a search where I researched many indie publishers. I toyed with going the agent route a little bit, but I felt a little more lost in that realm. I did send out some query letters and things like that, but I didn't get much response. And then didn't know where to go. But then I just thought, well, why don't I research some more indie publishers? There was one in Vancouver that I was interested in, that a friend of mine had published a book with, which seemed like a super cool press. But that just led me to like a big search. And I just submitted to ones that seemed to have an interest in the type of books, in Boy Falling, House Rujo, the kind of books that I was going to make. And then I ended up with signing with Black Rose Writing, which is in Texas. And they put out a lot of books a year in many genres. So they're actually they're a bit different than lots of indie presses put out only a few books a year. I mean, there's a whole range. This particular publisher puts out a lot of books in all kinds of genres. So they're very open to what I had to contribute, as well as all kinds of other books. So
funny you mentioned the publisher being based in Texas. I'm also a publisher based in Texas. I'm in Houston.
Oh, okay.
Transcendent Zero Press is the name of my publishing
okay.
company. We mostly do poetry, but we've published a few academic type books like literary criticism and stuff. So we do a lot of publishing too.
And then you put out your anthology, the Literary Parrot anthology.
Yes, we did. That was an association between me and New York Parrot. Yes, the Transcendent Zero Press and New York Parrot.
Awesome. Congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. Yeah. It was a lot of work. It was crazy, but it was great, and we hope people keep buying it. So we have a few more minutes if you want to, say a few thank yous to friends, family, inspirations, or give some advice to fellow writers out there and how to keep their craft moving.
Oh, well, lots of people I would thank. I mean, anybody who supports a writer, whether it's in an editorial role or a friend role, or, any kind of reader, I'm sure is so helpful. It's like, there's so much to writing where you're just it feels like working in a vacuum. And I mean, you know what I'm talking about? I'm sure. So anyone who's helping produce the books or reading the books, buying the books. And doing reviews, etc. I'm very thankful to all those people. Absolutely. And advice for other writers. I really do try to support other writers when I get the chance. I love to do that. I love to just encourage people, when everyone has a unique voice, you as a writer have a voice that's unique in all the world. So, do keep trying, do keep bringing your stories out, because all of that just enriches the world, So, absolutely. I mean, practical advice, I guess I've learned some things along the way. So if someone asks me for some practical advice, sometimes I have something to contribute. But as far as that kind of what's that impulse for wanting to be a writer, for wanting to make a book or make a story? It's so deep in our spirit, and as a human, as humans, we're so story oriented. So, and I know I myself, my God, if I didn't have books to read, I don't know how I would deal with life.
Right.
Especially in the night when I can't sleep. It's like, right? Like, what would we do without books to read?
Absolutely. And it's definitely true what you say about us being story driven. narrative driven. Something about that
Right.
compels our behavior to an extent. I think we like to organize life in a little kind of like a, sort of linear fashion where it's, I have a book called Narrative Psychology that deals with
Mm,
various ways we author our lives, and how we can
yeah.
structure various, elements to our, the way we interpret our being, the way we interpret our life and how we're moving. We're sort of like the narrator.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting
Totally.
stuff.
Totally. I feel like, like if you and I could go out to dinner and like have a long night just talking about what you just said in the
Mhm.
last couple minutes.
I think so. Well, thanks
It's a
for
very
joining us.
rich topic.
It is. It's quite thick. Quite thick. I mean, this book it's a small book, but it only just scratches the surface.
Right.
Thanks for joining us today, Jenny. It's been fabulous talking with you.
Thanks so
And
much for having me.
I think we got a lot of interesting insights and awareness from you. So I think it was really a pleasant conversation, and I'm glad to have you. And
Well,
thanks
thanks
to
so
Mike
much.
Matthews for pushing you our direction.
Yeah.
So
Thanks to Mike.
I'll get that link to you pretty soon.
Perfect.
Again, this is the Literary Parrot. If you guys haven't purchased this out there who are purchasing, we have, this came out August 1st. It's on Amazon, the Literary Parrot Series 1. So this is a great book. 249 fabulous pages of literature. It includes the mission statement for the New York Parrot, in case anybody is curious what we're about, what we're trying to accomplish. So please be in touch with me at Literary Corner at New York Parrot if you'd like to be a guest, or if you'd like to ask questions or suggest people. If you're a press out there and you have authors who want to promote, we will definitely be interested in hearing from you. We'll set that up with you anytime. So if you want to be a guest, again, that's Literary Corner at NewYorkParrot.com. Our next anthology will be in December. This one was just released again on August 1st, the Literary Parrot Series 1. We'll have Series 2 in December, so keep an eye out. If you've been on our show, we'll be in touch with you, most likely to contribute to that anthology of Series 2. So that will be in December again. And we have donations if you would like to donate to the Literary Parrot or to Parrot Literary Corner. We have donations available at paypal.me/nyparrot. That's where you can donate, and we'll take any sum of money, $5, $1,000, whatever you got, spare change, anything. So if you haven't subscribed, please do. It's a wonderful opportunity to be on the cuff of today's literary conversations. We had Jenny Jaeckel today. Tomorrow, you don't know where we'll be. Take a look. It's in a book, and we'll have a wonderful, wonderful opportunity of writing. Today is a great day to get out there and get your writing going. So please do. And subscribe to our channel. We're looking for 1 million subscribers. It's been the Literary Parrot, New York Literary Corner.